Welcome to AmerisourceBergen and LSPediA Investigator Pilot Webcast. The webcast will start shortly. Again, welcome. The webcast will start shortly. This presentation is for the manufacturer suppliers for AmerisourceBergen onboarding Investigator Pilot. Let's get this webcast started. There are a couple housekeeping items. This webcast is available via computer audio as well as phone audio. If you feel your audio quality is not as clear, please join it via the phone. The phone number and the code is available in the webcast invite. If you have any questions, you can write down your questions and submit after the webcast. You will receive an email with a link to a form. In the form, you can submit questions, feedbacks, and comments. And the questions will be answered in a follow-up open office session Tuesday. If you lose your connection, please close your current webcast and rejoin. If there are any additional requests, you can always send us an email. There are resources, information available to you toward the end of the webinar, and there are several email boxes that you can use. Also, this webcast will be available by demand via recording. All attendees of this webinar will receive a link to the recording. Here is the safe harbor statement. All information in this presentation is current as of April 2020. AmerisourceBergen and LSPediA will not update any statement in light of new information or future events in the stack. Once the stack is distributed, we will not be obligated to update the deck and redistribute a new deck. This presentation is intended for information purpose only and may not be incorporated into any contract. In this webcast, we'll go over the DSCSA Saleable Returns requirement, ADC Saleable Returns process, the notification of negative verifications resulted from VIS verification, and investigator onboarding activities and investigator pilot activities. And there will also be resources made available to you and some actions items and next steps. And with that, please help me welcome our speakers.
Okay, hey, I just want to first, before Mike gets into the requirements, kind of just say thank you everybody for joining. We realize that we're living in somewhat difficult times. But DSCSA is still there. We still have to implement it. I think we're all trying to leverage our resources as we best can. And again, I just want to emphasize, I do appreciate you all taking time out of your schedules to attend this webinar and listen to what we have to say. So turn this over to Mike to get it going.
Thanks, Matt. So up on the screen, we're going to take a high-level look at what's going on right now and the focus of today's webcast as we work our way down to ground level. What's on the screen here, the timeline for DSCSA, is not up here to teach the choir to sing. I think most people on this call have become quite familiar with this timeline, but there are a couple of things that are worthy of noting. You know, if I go all the way back to my work in the days at GSK, that take us back beyond the beginning of DSCSA, all the way back into the days of California, and even touching upon Florida pedigree. Some folks in the supply chain have been really working for well over 10 years now in putting barcodes on products, along with serialization and unique product identification that is built into that barcode. Up until this point in time, that barcode and its associated data have been nothing more than artwork on a package. So what is key to note about what we have up here on the screen is where our focus is in 2020. The saleable returns process and for verification is actually the first time that the industry will be utilizing those barcodes as something more than just artwork on the package. It is actually going to be used as a qualifier or even a disqualifier of whether or not a product can remain in the supply chain from the compliance perspective. This is obviously a unique challenge. When we look at what the industry has done over the past couple of years in trying to prepare for this, in the beginning of an attempt to scan the barcodes for their viability, they've been performing it a little bit less than standard, to say the least. And we'll talk about that more in a couple of moments. But I think the other notable here is not only is this the first time that these barcodes are going to be scanned for compliance, but it is also the last time that the industry and the supply chain will be scanning barcodes for a compliance reason prior to going live in November of 2023, when the entire supply chain is anticipated and even expected to do everything required around traceability and do it right first time. So obviously this is a key milestone. It is a testing of the mettle of industry and all their preparedness to date and their ability to reach 2023 and to do all that in a manner that is delivering supply chain security and patient safety. Next slide, please. So the challenges of false negatives. I think one of the first things that need to be noted here is that the saleable returns process is anything but broken. I think the industry owes a great deal of thanks to wholesalers, distributors, AmerisourceBergen, and all the rest that have done a fantastic job historically of managing saleable returns, as they will concur up to 2% of the products in the supply chain come back to them through this saleable returns process. They have done a great job of visual inspection, going through their records and having awareness that product is coming back to them from trusted partners. They are able to look at their records and know that they have sold these products, if not at a unique product level at this point, at least by the general product identity. They know they're trading these products and they're able to put them back in the supply chain. The supply chain has become absolutely accustomed to this product being there. It's seamless. Up to this point, most manufacturers are unaware of it because there's no financial transactions or anything like that going on. But all the way through the supply chain continuity down to the patient, this product is expected to be there. So when we talk about the challenges of false negatives, the failure of a barcode and check against a manufacturer's repository to deliver that green light, that challenges a lot of things in the supply chain. So from a business value perspective, obviously, product in the supply chain is of critical importance. It's become accustomed to be there. If it were to be removed from the supply chain, it certainly would have a cascading effect. Manufacturers would have to obviously pick up production to make up for that shortage. There would be marks of out of stock, and ultimately patients in need of that product will suddenly have it not available to them. So it's absolutely critical that the supply chain is doing something here that takes from the perspective of a process that is not broken and adds, for obvious good reason, a verification scan because the product has been moved around. It's obviously a key opportunity to make sure nothing has happened in that process and do that verification. But it is a process that is supposed to enhance saleable returns, not hamper it. So scanning and the potential of the false negatives becomes almost a monkey in the wrench here. And so the things that are at stake, obviously, as mentioned, supply chain continuity, the shortages of products, and then what is at the heart of DSCSA? That ability to identify suspect or potentially illegitimate products, and to do that in a manner that is absolute, so that if, in fact, something has entered the supply chain, it's immediately identified, it is quarantined, investigated, and ultimately reported to the FDA. When we look at this from a perspective of AmerisourceBergen, we're talking about large numbers here across multiple DCs. And when we look at how this could be addressed, many folks in the industry have talked about the use of manual efforts, phone calls, web portals, all these things that are very much tied to a manual process. But from a scale and sustainability perspective, for AmerisourceBergen, as they're going to share, this is really not feasible. Too many returns, too much impact. At the end of the day, not enough floor space. What's key here is that day in and day out, the volumes that are being presented here need to be addressed. They need to be cleared, put back into inventory, or put in the cage and investigated promptly, because day in, day out, the next supply of saleable returns are coming in. So obviously a manual perspective on this was not feasible, and the opportunity here came to give an ability for AmerisourceBergen to absorb this in seamless fashion. Okay, next slide, please. So over the past couple of years, as I mentioned, the industry has taken upon itself opportunities to start scanning barcodes, whether it's the big three, GS1, the HDA, companies like LSPediA. We've gone through multiple efforts, even in a pilot with the FDA, of scanning inventory and trying to assess its viability going forwards. The numbers have ranged from absolutely unacceptable levels from when all the scanning really started. It's becoming better, but certainly not optimal. So at the end of the day, what we're looking at here is ranging anywhere from 5% to 25 or 30% failures. And when you look at 2% of all the product in the supply chain coming back through this process, and potentially of that 2%, these kind of statistics coming up as negative, it's a heavy challenge. It's not only an extreme challenge for the manufacturers, and some of them who have amazingly high volumes impacted here that they've never had to address before. But again, when you look at it from the AmerisourceBergen perspective of how they are going to manage everybody's volumes. So the opportunity here was to bring in automation and relieve manual efforts, to use algorithmic technology that not only reads a barcode for a binary yes, no, do I recognize it, but look for anomalies within that barcode that are known, so that an investigation is not required for false negatives. So the automated notifications that will come out of the solution for the benefit of both AmerisourceBergen and the associated manufacturer will give them the reason, the root cause failure of that negative verification, unless of course it comes up and says, you know what, no matter what technology or algorithm we use, this product identifier does not seem to be coming from your repository, and therefore it flags it as a potential suspect or illegitimate product for investigation. And from that perspective, what we do is create an opportunity to be scalable and sustainable in the management of all this. So at the end of the day, if 1 of 7 barcodes are coming up with a negative verification, there has to be a methodology behind resolving it, and to do it effectively. And again, to be able to do it in, day out fashion. So that gives us sort of an overview of what we're talking about here, but the real intention of today was to look at all of this from an AmerisourceBergen perspective. What is their perspective? What is the position? And what is the path forward? And so for that, I'm going to turn it back to Matt. Sir?
Okay, thanks, Mike. So I think, Mike touched on the challenges of barcodes and some of the issues it may present. And, we know that when we talk about verification, there's more than just barcode concerns. Obviously, mismatched dating, unreadable barcodes, are those suspect or not? We also know that there are data issues. Data may be residing in site servers and not central repositories. There could be lookup directory issues where we haven't loaded a GTIN. So when you look at this in the aggregate, and from our perspective, when I sit back and look and go, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know the number of exceptions I'm going to have. So just, again, taking the data points we have around, my own experiences as a manufacturer and dealing with CMOs, we're estimating we're going to have 10 to 15% exceptions. Those exceptions most likely will be false negatives, but we've got to go through a process. We must investigate that with the manufacturer. So when I think about that, I think, how am I going to manage that, especially when we start going live? How am I going to do that with my manufacturing partners? It keeps me up at night. And we've done a lot of work internally on how we thought we can do this or think we can do this. And again, this this presentation is really the net result of how we think the most effective method of doing this to go forward. So next slide, please. So if I stick with this 10 to 15% estimate on exceptions, and I start doing the math, and you know, Mike touched on this, that's about 57,000 returns a day, and at 15%, that's 8,000 negatives. That is an astronomical number for me as a network to try and manage with the manufacturers. You know, we certainly can call, we certainly can email to resolve that. I can put people in my DCs. You know, one of the things I don't want to overlook, and you know, reflecting back on the picture Mike had a couple slides ago, my rate limiting factor isn't the number of people I can throw at this. My rate limiting factor is shelf space, and that is very limited in my distribution center. So I think, again, coupled with the resource impact of how to deal with this, as well as primarily the space constraints of how to deal with this. Literally, we don't have space to put all this product that's going to be investigated. And then you think about it, I got 50,000 returns today. You know what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm going to have 50,000 more returns. So this isn't a linear issue. This is an exponential issue that we really need to be intelligent about and address in the most efficient, automated manner possible. Next slide, Mike. So again, just keeping with that thread, and we can argue whether 15%, 10%, 5% is the right exception number. We can argue about whether it's going to take 30 minutes to resolve or 20 minutes or an hour. But again, when we just did some rough math, and let's assume it takes 30 minutes to resolve an issue, and you think about what an issue involves. It often involves taking a picture of a product. It often involves sending that picture to somebody or calling somebody and reading a serial number and hoping you read that serial number accurately and didn't say "oh" instead of 0. And so, you know, you really think, what does it take to resolve an exception? It can be very labor intensive. I think if you use some of the data points from the European experience with FMD, you know, it can take work. So again, when you look at the volume we have, the 2 million sale, or the 15 million saleable returns a year, potentially 15% exceptions, you know, that translates into potentially 4,300 hours a day to resolve exceptions. That could be people in my DC, it could be centrally managed people. You know, that's a significant amount of work. You translate that into FTEs, 540. Again, you know, are they really spending 30 minutes? Are they waiting on emails? Regardless of the number, whether 540 is high or 540 is low, it's still work that needs done. And this whole time, I've got product taking up space on a shelf, and I got that same amount of exceptions coming in the next day. Next slide, Mike. And I think it's also safe to assume if I'm dealing with this workload, so are my manufacturing friends. My largest manufacturer has a little over 1 million saleable returns with me a year, which means they probably are dealing with 3.5 million as an industry. So if my exception rate is the industry exception rate, you know, the manufacturers also are going to have a burden. And again, I think if you look at the experiences of FMD and a lot of the work that some of the experiences that they've had, you know, I think they're aware, and also in the same boat we are, is, you know, we have a lot of exceptions we're going to have, and it's going to take time to work through it. But again, we must do this. I mean, these are negatives. These could ultimately be suspect product. The last thing we want to do is accidentally get real suspect product back in the supply chain. But at the same time, we want to get good product back in the supply chain. So, you know, we need to be intelligent. We need to be efficient. We need to be managing this in a very responsible manner so that we can do the right thing, protect the supply chain, not just from illegitimate or suspect product, but also protect the supply chain from shortages and access issues. Next slide. So that leads us to our position. And again, we thought about this a lot. I'm fully transparent. We threw some numbers together. Again, we can debate whether 15% is high or low. We looked at offshore models, moving the resolution of these over to Europe. We looked at, do we build an automated tool internally? We also, in parallel, you know, we're struggling, as many of you guys are aware, you know, we have to submit 3911s when we have cargo theft, last mile cargo theft. So we're trying to figure out, how do we triangulate all this documentation and figure out a way to automate this and minimize resources. And again, in back of my mind, I know I'm running out of shelf space. So that really led us to our selection of LSPedia's Investigator product. It really does, as you'll see later by Kelly and Andy, it allows us to automate this, work smarter, not necessarily throwing resources at it. And I think, we hope as well from our manufacturing partners, you guys see the benefits in how we're using this, is that it does allow a digital documentation and remediation thread. One of the things that's extremely important to us is, and again, the risk with email, that should be documented. This gives us a method to fully document all potentially suspect, and illegitimate processes in one place. And so I think the value that adds, just again, work smarter, work better, keep that product where it needs to be, which is in the supply chain, take that bad product out of the supply chain. This really is for us, a game changer that allows us not to have to throw people at a problem. Next slide, please. So our hope, and again, I can't repeat this enough, I don't know what I don't know, but I mean, our hope and just doing the math, right? Our thinking here is, from a daily workload perspective, we should drop this down drastically. We're, again, as Andy and Kelly will get into in the future, we're integrating this directly into our enterprise solution, directly into our VRS system. We're looking at this really just drives automation, intelligent automation. We're also hoping we don't have to hire 540 people, but maybe it's 2 or 3. Again, we don't know what we don't know. We're still going to have to staff up to handle exceptions. We're just, again, hoping to work smarter and faster. I'm hoping to keep the resource burden out of my DCs, centralize that within one team, and again, work smarter, work better with our manufacturing partners. And honestly, a lot of this is going to be driven by false negatives, as Mike said. False negatives are going to work their way out of the supply chain over the next 4 or 5 years. We're going to get better. We're going to get mature. I think the reality we got to admit, though, and one item that does concern me is when I have an issue, it's not on a physical single product. It's probably on the whole batch, whether it be data or barcoding. And so I think, again, we will mature, we will get better as an industry. But until then, again, I can't reiterate, we have to work smarter and we have to be automated to keep that good product where it needs to go to the patients that need it. Keep my shelves only half filled in my quarantine area, and get that suspect and illegitimate product where it needs to be, out of the supply chain. So next slide. So I spoke to this already. I mean, this is just kind of in summary. Why Investigator for us? Honestly, it's the only solution out there that solves the problem. It solves our ability to, one, manage suspect illegitimate product and 3911 notification in one place. It solves our problem of having to deal with false negatives and how do we document that? How do we avoid phone calls? How do we avoid staffing up? Really to us, it was kind of that, missing cog to our enterprise solution that we, honestly didn't have an answer for internally. So that's why we went with Investigator. I will be turning over to Kelly to get into some of the details, but one of the things I do want to mention, with this and kind of the point of this presentation is we are looking to pilot this before we go into full production mode, just to make sure that the processes work, we're interacting correctly with our manufacturers, and that the process is clear. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Kelly Lacy and our team. Kelly has done a phenomenal job of managing VRS and all things saleable returns for ABC. So I will let Kelly take it from here.
Thanks, Matt. In preparation of Go Live, we would like to test with multiple partners to increase exposure and create a comfort level and understanding of the LSPediA Investigator product. Those suppliers involved would go through a short onboarding process similar to the production onboarding process. We want everyone to understand that the pilot would include the 7 unique GS1 response scenarios. The testing would start with requests being created from ABC and responses provided via VRS or EPCIS data in the staging environment, with non-verifications flowing into Investigator. This would create an automated email notification to the supplier and allow the supplier to effectively confirm or update the status while providing appropriate documentation for auditing purposes. Any update to a status would be systematically forwarded back to ABC to indicate the needed move of products to the appropriate location in the warehouse. If the product was deemed as suspect, the proper escalation process would be followed in this staging environment. Following the entire process in the pilot will allow all partners to see any points where SOP or work instruction updates are needed. Next slide, please. Wow, this screen represents a more detailed flow of how the pilot would work. We will follow the flow for better understanding. First, let's notice that the different colors mean. Pink indicates the supplier or manufacturer steps, yellow indicates the distributor steps, and blue provides the opportunity for the investigator product to help the distributor and the manufacturer out. You can see that there are 3 separate swim lanes, starting with AmerisourceBergen in yellow at the bottom, moving up where the manufacturer or supplier is shown in the middle swim lane, and then finally up to the top swim lane where the FDA is shown in the final steps of an actual suspect product designation. While the investigator product will not get involved until a non-verification or non-response from VRS occurs, this flow represents the entire high-level process of verification of saleable returns as a distributor. If we start at the bottom left corner of the flow, this is where ABC Warehouse Associate will scan a product deemed appropriate for saleable returns processing. That data will be sent through our verification process and up to the manufacturer swim lane at the VRS endpoint in blue. And the verification response coming back and updating ABC systems accordingly. The responses were false but not recalled or expired is returned as a verification response, or non-responses will be submitted to investigator. You can see this in the light blue square, which prompts an email to the manufacturer. The email will contain all pertinent information to aid the manufacturer to research on their end, including but not limited to the requester, the 4 product identifiers, the response provided by the VRS or EPCIS data, a timestamp, and as well as a link to log into the investigator product. Suppliers can maintain updates and provide documentation on a specific verification using the investigator product. Note that this does not in any way update any data or information on the VRS network. If, during the investigation, data is found to be incorrect on the lookup directory, we would suggest that the manufacturer update that data as discovered to prevent future issues. There may be situations where the investigation does in fact confirm suspect product. Investigator will aid in the filing of the 3911 by populating some of the pertinent data in the form to be submitted to the FDA. Andy, would you like to add anything?
Certainly. Thank you, Kelly. It's important to note that while the investigator aids in the creation of the 3911, the reporting entity must finalize and submit the form to the FDA. This will allow your security and quality teams to actually view that 3911 before it's actually submitted. And we also understand that this is a complex process flow. We will be holding some educational sessions where we will be able to break this down and take it from the spaghetti chart that you see here into a more manageable bite-sized pieces as we move forward. Next slide, please. So what is the investigator? Well, to start with, it's not a VRS. In fact, it's VRS agnostic. That means that if you already have a VRS solution, you can still utilize the investigator to help streamline your enhanced issue tracking process. It supplies a collaborative workspace between the manufacturer and distributor to promote an intelligent way to find streamlined resolutions for investigations. Some of the uses are for negative verifications and to support product investigations, to facilitate 3911 creation, and to simplify cargo theft investigation and reporting. Some of the benefits that you'll find are it streamlines your workflow and issue communications. It allows good products to go back into the saleable inventory faster and get out to the people who actually need them, the patients, quicker. It cuts the need to inflate your FTE count in order to be able to handle these investigation or these requests that you'll be receiving from your downstream partners. It also allows bad product to be identified and handled correctly, quickly. And then lastly, again, it's VRS agnostic. Next slide, please. On this screen, you see on the left-hand side a negative verification that the operator would have received whenever they sent the VRS request out into the verification network. On the right-hand side, you'll see a notification email that's come out of Investigator and has been sent to a manufacturer. Notice that the email shows all four PI elements. It also displays the error returned from the VRS response. This allows you to know, going into the investigation, exactly what was deemed to be the error. That way, you can get your investigation and target it accordingly so that you can handle the product quickly and efficiently. Next slide, please. The left-hand side of this screen shows you the notification screen. This is where all the given notifications for a specific trading partner would live so that they can handle them. As you can see, this grouping will allow you to target your workflow and make sure that the people that need to handle the investigation or the enhanced issue tracking can actually go through and manually handle it quickly, efficiently, and all in one place. On the right-hand side is an example of the notification screen where you can attach documents, verify PI, and then once you set the disposition for a notification, it's passed back to ABC so that they can handle it and act accordingly. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Kelly to go deeper into this.
Thanks, Andy. This automated transmission of data between systems will allow us to get any positively verified product back to the shelf as soon as possible and to provide an appropriate audit trail of suspect product investigations for both the distributor and the manufacturer. Ultimately, we need to keep the product that is an exception to the saleable returns process moving to prevent negative impact to the supply chain. The storage space at our warehouses is limited for the exceptions in the process. Without efficient verification investigations, we will inadvertently tie up product, money, and space for the manufacturer and the distributor. Matt, would you like to speak to the timeline we're planning on following?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So this is consistent with what we've communicated in the past with regards to how we intend to ramp up. Again, we've always envisioned phasing this into a production environment. Again, we don't want to per se turn the floodgates on with 60,000 G10s and verification requests across our whole network. So right now, given where we are in the state of the current COVID crisis, these are the dates we're still hoping to hit, just given our capabilities around deploying into our DCs. So right now, our thought process is in June, we already have one distribution center that is live on capabilities. We intend to turn that on in a production environment with select packages and select manufacturers and doing verification requests. From that point, again, validating all our processes work and there are no tweaks required. We intend to start ramping that up. We'll be doing 4 DCs against all packages, all products that, again, manufacturers are ready to receive a verification request against, in 4 DCs with an end target of October 2020, in which we're verifying all products and all 30 of our DCs. Now, when we say all products, that is really driven by what manufacturers are loading their G10s in a VRS and or sending us data. So the control level really is in the manufacturer's hands, but these are our approaches to turning this on. And what's important is when we say turn it on in production, that also includes the use of Investigator. The moment I turn it on and get a negative, be it a false negative or a real negative, I have to investigate it. So as Kelly mentioned with the pilot, our goal is prior to June to run a pilot, get our processes nailed down, make any tweaks we have to so that we can hit this ramp up timeline that we're showing right now. Next slide, please. And again, just to reiterate, and we've sent out communications for the last couple of years kind of to this extent. We are supporting two methods of doing verification for November of this year. One being sending us CPSIS data, which we put in our own repository and verifying against. The deadline really for that, and as you're watching this webinar, the state may have come and gone. We really needed to start receiving that data by May 1st to build up enough inventory of data to check against. Obviously, if you're unable to meet that timeline and you still wish to send data, please do reach out to our team. We'll work with you and understand what our options and risks are. We expect the majority, and from a data point, we know the majority of our manufacturers using a VRS. We also have a 5/1 deadline where we really need to understand what provider are you using, who are your contacts, and we need to begin the process to onboarding for Investigator. Again, if I want to start turning on all products in July, I really need to have VRS tested. I need to have you onboarded. We need to do any kind of qualification testing you may require as a manufacturer. So although that 3-4 months is a lot of time, it really isn't when you consider I have 500 manufacturers to work with. So I can't emphasize enough, do not wait. Please reach out to us, please engage with us. We have a lot of work to do just to begin the process of testing and onboarding. Next slide, please. So really to wrap it up from my point here, we talk about onboarding, and we've started some of this process. I think the first and foremost is, who is your point of contact when there is a potentially suspect or suspect product? We have been asking for this, and I know, even internally ourselves, we struggled with this a couple months ago, saying, who does this go to? It's not your serialization lead, is it? Or is it quality? What group gets it? So I think, a big to-do for you, if you haven't figured this out already, is when there's an issue, who in your company should we reach out to resolve the issue? The other thing I'll add on that one too, just as a best practice, create distribution lists. Don't give us an individual's names. Individuals tend to win the lottery, and when they win the lottery, they tend to get out of DSCSA. So if you can, please think about who your point of contact, think about what function will handle that, and create a distribution list for them to be part of, so that we can reach out to them. Second, please complete the onboarding form that we sent to you in the original notification about the Investigator a couple weeks ago. We have had some questions where people have provided us contacts already, and do they need to fill out the form again? We can go ahead and do that on your behalf, since you have already provided the information to us, if you do not want to do that. But please do let us know. It is a very short form though, and we do need to get it in one place because we are onboarding that to the LSPediA Investigator platform. And then finally, join the open office sessions. We'll be hosting these Tuesdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. It's an opportunity for you guys to call in, talk to the LSPediA team, talk to Kelly on my team, talk to me if I'm able to join. It's just a good collaborative session. I think we still have a lot of kinks to work through on the technical side to get all this ready. But I think when we start talking about how do we deal with false negatives, how do we deal with exceptions, there's a lot of questions. A lot of questions on barcodes. If I can't scan a barcode, is that a suspect product? We need to talk about that because maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So I welcome you guys to join those sessions. It's a good opportunity to be collaborative. And I think that's all I have from my end. I know I'm going to turn it back over to Rhea to close. I just want to thank all you guys again for joining, taking the time out of your day. Again, I know we are in very interesting and complex and challenging times. I know some of us have kids that we would like to offload to other people. So again, I do appreciate your time, your effort, and looking forward to working with you guys in the future on moving forward with DSCSA. Okay.
Thank you, Matt. Before we close, there are resources available to you. Andy, will you help our audience to these resources, please?
Certainly, Rhea. So what do we have for you as far as resources go? Well, we have the obvious answers, which are the websites that are listed at the top. AmerisourceBergen's is the first one that you'll see, and then underneath that you have the landing page for the Investigator, as well as the landing page for OneScan as a whole. We'll be doing some training, both instructor-led web training classes, and then also we've been steadily recording videos that are up on the OneScan and Investigator sites for you to use to kind of prep yourself and see how the flow works. And then lastly, we are publishing work instructions that are a written document that walk you through using images of the web pages to instruct you how to follow the investigation and how to report back and close it out eventually. We'll also be offering workshops, the open office sessions that Matt has spoken of, and then in addition, we'll be doing topic-driven meetings on specific functions inside of the investigator, as well as small group meetings that will allow you to have a more one-on-one feel so that if you have questions and maybe the topic-driven meeting has a lot of people in it, you don't have to be afraid. You can ask us the questions that you have. And with all of these, we understand that we've been living and breathing this for a while. We also understand that this is new for you. So we're trying to bring it to a level that you guys can get up to our level, hopefully quickly, and start living and breathing this as well. And then finally, we have our support channels. We have support.lspedia.com, which is our landing page for our support. If you have questions, you can go out there and submit a ticket and we'll get back to you. We also have the investigator@lspedia.com email, which is the email for all things investigator. And then lastly, VRS@AmerisourceBergen if this is an ABC question that you want to field to Kelly and her team. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rhea to close it out.
Thank you, Andy. Please watch out for an email after this webcast, and in that email, there's a link to a form for you to submit questions, feedbacks, and comments. We look forward to hear from you. And please join open sessions in the following Tuesday and every Tuesdays, and we'll be there to hold collaborative meetings, answer all your questions, and move this project forward.